At some point in our lives, we've all faced a situation where someone says, you can't go in there. Whether you heeded that advice or not, you might have felt the urge to peek behind the curtain and see what you were missing. But what if that bouncer at the door attitude applied to entire countries? Vast places full of language, culture, and life that for one reason or another, you simply can't visit. Well, that's what we're exploring today. Which countries around the world are governments barring entry to almost entirely? And in which nations, even if you do manage to get in, won't they let you truly see them? Let's find out. Now, just before we get started, let's clear something up because we know how some of you in the comments can be. Spare us the,
oh, I went to country X on this list and it was fine, Simon. You're lying.
Here's the thing. While most of these countries are technically possible to visit depending on where you're from and your specific circumstances, some places are harder to access than others. For some people, it's about nationality. For others, it's tougher if you don't speak the language or know someone within the country. Every country treats people differently, and just because something was easy for you doesn't mean that it'll be easy for everyone, all right? Let's get into it. Let's start off with the one you're all probably thinking of, North Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea goes by many names in media worldwide, but one of the most common is the Hermit Kingdom. For a long time, the nation didn't let anybody in at all, not a single soul. This was to keep the country and its citizens politically isolated from what Pyongyang deems dangerous foreign influences. Nowadays, you can visit if you want to, but it ain't easy. Firstly, you need a visa, like with most countries, as well as proof of a yellow fever vaccination, which is common in many parts of the world. It's estimated that around 5,000 Westerners travel to North Korea annually for tourism, so if you're from the West, they're not exactly handing out visas. On top of that, you can't go straight there. You have to fly to China first to get into the nation, either by train from Beijing or through Air Koryo, the DPRK's flag-carrying airline. But in truth, that's not the most difficult part. Paradoxically, it's when you enter North Korea that you find you can't really go there. I mean, not the real North Korea anyway. When foreigners are allowed into the country, they must book with approved agencies that offer official state-guided tours showcasing only the parts of the country that Pyongyang wants the world to see and nothing else. Tourists are advised not to wander in their hotel or go off the beaten track, as this could lead to arrest. If you take pictures of something you're not supposed to, you could also be arrested. If they just don't like the look of you upon entry, you could also be arrested then. Fail to follow the rules, and it could be even worse. I mean, just ask Otto Warmbier. But there's more. You have to register with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if you stay in the country for longer than 24 hours, although many tour agencies and hotels will do this for you. You can bring mobile phones in, but not GPS devices, and you have to buy a domestic SIM card that connects to the local internet. That ensures that you can call other foreigners and even international numbers, but not local ones. So you can go to North Korea with a few hurdles, unless you're an American, in which case you're totally banned. But what you will actually see and do while there isn't the North Korea that its citizens know. So even if you do go there, are you really going there? Eritrea is often referred to as the North Korea of Africa due to its extensive human rights abuses, isolationism, and control over its citizens' lives. While this comparison is a useful shorthand, Eritrea is its own brand of dystopian hellscape. It is one of the least developed countries in the world, run by a one-party authoritarian system. Located on the coast of the Red Sea, one might think it sounds like an ideal holiday destination. However, it has a low number of tourists compared to its peers. There are several barriers to entry if you do want to visit as well. For starters, you need a visa from an embassy to get there, and Eritrea only has a small number of embassies worldwide, usually in nations with a high Eritrean population like those in Western Europe. So, if you don't have an Eritrean embassy in your country, you might be out of luck. On top of that, it can take multiple months to get a visa. You can get a tourist visa on arrival, but only if you've booked with an official tour guide beforehand. But that's not the toughest part of seeing Eritrea. Remember when we said it's called the North Korea of Africa? Well, it has a lot of similar pitfalls for visitors. When foreigners do visit, they are severely restricted to specific areas. Tourist zones are monitored by security checkpoints. Visiting areas outside the capital city requires permits. To go almost anywhere as a foreigner in Eritrea, you need one of those permits. You can get them at a small office in the middle of the capital, Asmara, but the rest of the country is off limits. If you're a dual national, you even need an exit permit to leave the country. When applying for different permits, and even when applying for your visa, you have to specify the exact dates you'll spend in each place and for how long, leaving no room for spontaneity. It's a bizarre place that only seems to accept tourists begrudgingly. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is a country almost synonymous with political instability, economic disparity, underdevelopment, and chaos. But as it turns out, one of the only truly organized things about it is the system through which you enter the country. The nation issues several 100,000 foreign visas annually, depending on the current political situation, but some visitors have to meet a pretty high bar. In addition to a visa, you may need a consular certificate, depending on your circumstances. But most importantly, you're going to need vaccines. A lot of them. The only mandatory vaccine is for yellow fever, the same one as in many countries around the world. However, many vaccines are strongly recommended before you visit. Hepatitis A and B, typhoid, cholera, polio, rabies, and meningitis are all highly advised. Arguably, most importantly of all, a malaria prevention vaccine is essential in the Congo's tropical climate. And then you actually arrive. You get to the Congo, and you don't exactly have free reign of the surrounding jungle landscape. Guerrilla military groups dominate large swaths of the country, making travel into certain areas almost impossible due to militant control. As a foreigner, you face risks of kidnapping so severe that you're not supposed to hail taxis in the street. Scams, general crime, and terrorism also prevent many from venturing far outside their hotels. The government can cut off vital services, stopping you from getting anywhere or even leaving. Phone and internet service can be disconnected, roads can be closed, borders can be slammed shut, and flights can be cancelled. Depending on the situation, you can barely go anywhere in the country that you got all of those shots to enter in the first place. This next one might surprise you. It's not danger or a particularly difficult visa that will rule you out of visiting here. It's just straight up difficult to travel to. We're talking about the Polynesian nation of Kiribati, the remote Pacific island paradise which has almost zero tourism infrastructure and is made up of 33 coral atolls spread across a massive expanse of the Pacific Ocean, 3.5 million square kilometers to be exact. While there's nothing stopping you from theoretically visiting every atoll, only two have airports. So if you want to see the rest, you're going to need a boat or to charter a seaplane. It's one of the least visited countries in the entire world for a reason. Transport to get around is difficult and expensive, considering you need a flight to even get to your breakfast buffet in the morning. Even the capital of Tarawa is thousands of miles from other transport hubs like those in Australia, and don't expect any hotels either. The accommodations are extremely basic. Flights are relatively infrequent, hugely expensive, and bad weather threatens their reliability. Meanwhile, the country's small bureaucracy means that even though visa policies are pretty relaxed, if you do need one, it's going to take a minute. It's recommended that when you arrive, you become proficient with the indigenous language quickly, as there are not a ton of English speakers. Getting around on the small atolls themselves can be a challenge due to extreme weather patterns and even interactions with the locals. Alcoholism is a serious issue on the islands, as many people homebrew a drink called toddy from coconut sap. People regularly walk around with machetes in the capital, so it's often recommended not to go out alone. Even though the locals are considered notoriously friendly, alcohol can change people. With the world so connected today, it's strange to have a place that's hard to go to simply because it's logistically difficult to travel there. Now to a lesser-known nation in Africa that presents its fair share of difficulties for visitors, the Central African Republic. There are two main reasons why it's hard to travel there. The first is that you need a visa, like with most countries. So, well, what's the big deal there? Well, you need to obtain that visa at an embassy, and there just aren't that many. For example, if you're from the UK, your nearest Central African Republic embassy is in Paris. If you live in Mexico or anywhere in Central or South America, it's Washington, D.C. In Australia, it's Beijing. So if you're unfortunate enough not to live in a country nearby one, you'll need a holiday to go on your holiday. Oh, and you'll need loads of vaccines as well. The second reason it's hard to go to the Central African Republic is that it's hopelessly dangerous, making it really hard to see much of the nation due to how perilous it is. The country has been subjected to coups, rebel groups, and instability that continues to this very day. Rebels control large swaths of the country, making travel to many parts very difficult and highly dangerous. There's a near constant threat of murder, robbery, kidnapping, and other violence. So you can travel there, but you might not make it very far. The chances of you seeing what you want to are slim, and your travel insurance will probably be voided. But I hear they offer great safaris to see actual gorillas in the wild. One of the hardest countries to get into in the world, with only 10,000 to 20,000 people visiting every year, is the Caspian nation of Turkmenistan. You know, the one with the massive golden statue and the eccentric dictator. They're very strict about granting visas, hence the small number of tourists for such a large country. One of the reasons it's so difficult to get a visa for Turkmenistan is that you need an official letter of invitation to enter. In some countries, this is more or less a piece of paper you pay for at the airport, just another bureaucratic hurdle. But in Turkmenistan, they take it very seriously. Letters have to be sent by local families to sponsor your entry into the country, either through tour guides or directly from the families themselves with whom people tend to stay. But you can't get a visa until you have one. No letter, no visa. Once there, the capital of Ashgabat is one of the few places where tourists are free to explore independently. However, for navigation and safety reasons, most people stay within walking distance of the capital. If you need to go further afield, there's minimal public transport, so you'll be relying on taxis. And further still, you'll need a guided tour. Certain areas of the country are completely off limits. Much like in North Korea, staying for more than a few days requires you to register with the government so that they can keep a close eye on you. Overall, Turkmenistan has a bit of everything that makes it a hard country to visit: a clunky bureaucratic process, a flashy capital with the majority of the nation locked away, and a pit of fire that's been burning for decades. I mean, alright, that last one's not required, but we couldn't not mention it. High up in the mountains of the Himalayas lies one of the hardest countries to visit in the entire world, and it has absolutely nothing to do with visas or vaccines, at least no more than any other nation. We're talking about Bhutan. Well, actually, it's relatively easy to visit Bhutan in theory, but it's really hard to stay for long unless you're pretty wealthy. That's because in Bhutan, every tourist must pay the government a daily fee to stay. It's known as the Sustainable Development Fee, and it was introduced after COVID when tourism in Bhutan increased. The idea is linked to Bhutan's ethos as a nation of preserving their country. Bhutan is the only carbon-negative country in the whole world, and clearly this has impacted how they approach tourism, not just from a carbon perspective, but also a cultural one. Bhutan's government wants their tourists to be high-value, low-impact, with the goal of protecting the nation's cultural heritage and environment. But this has the downside of making it very expensive to visit for the average person. The fee started at $65 before it was raised to an eye-watering $200 per night. It was then lowered to $100 in 2023. Currently, a group of 4 adults staying for 5 days would spend an extra $2,000 between them. Even children over 5 years old are subject to a 50% reduced fee. This means if you're not well off, it's nearly impossible to visit even for a short time. It's an interesting and different approach to tourism and sustainable development, but it does price a lot of people out of visiting, which is, we guess, kind of the point. It shows that not every country has to be war-torn, unstable, or impossible to travel to in order to make it hard to go there. Every country has its own reasons for keeping tourists away. But what all these countries share is a certain allure to travel to so-called forbidden places, to be one of the few to step on land considered off-limits to many. It's just enticing to the human spirit. And so, for as long as there are hard places to go, there will be people risking life, limb, and their bank accounts to get there. Thank you for watching.